Have you ever wanted to play as one of the most feared animals on the planet? Well, then I've got a game for you.
Deadly Creatures. A game about... No. 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 Wait, yes. Also yes. For some reason, also yes.
Deadly Creatures, a game where you play as a tarantula and a scorpion, something the front cover has absolutely no desire of letting you know.
The game was developed by Rainbow Studios, that despite the name has a logo very lacking in rainbows. You probably don't know them as the developer of MX vs. ATV Untamed, MX vs. ATV Reflex, MX vs. ATV Alive, MX vs. ATV All Out. I'm sensing a theme here. It was published by THQ. Remember them? Apparently the game started with the idea of controlling a snake using the Wii remote to slither around and strike at prey. You wouldn't know that after playing the final game because you never control a snake. There's always Snake Pass if you're looking for that.
Now, you may or may not have heard of the game before, but just by looking at this cover, you probably have an idea of what the game is like, and I can say with almost 100% certainty that what you were envisioning is exactly what the game is like. It's a 6 to 8 hour long game split into 10 chapters, where you alternate between playing the tarantula and the scorpion after each chapter. You make your way through linear stages, killing bugs, climbing things, and doing what tarantulas and scorpions probably do. Besides swinging through Manhattan and robbing banks, of course.
The setup for the game is basically a case of why bother. For whatever reason, Rainbow decided they absolutely needed some A-list actors for this game. When that didn't pan out, they went with Billy Bob Thornton and Dennis Hopper instead. They play two rednecks out on the hunt for gold, and that's about it. Rarely does what these two characters do have any effect on what you're doing as the bugs. There might be a shovel on the ground here or a knocked out guy there, but most interactions with them is limited to having to stand still during a cutscene while they talk to each other. It's not until the last two chapters that they really factor in at all. They also sort of try to set up a rivalry between the tarantula and scorpion with a couple fights between them, but this is basically ignored for most of the game and comes off as pretty pointless. So ignoring the story, if you can even call it that, let's talk about what you actually do as the titular Deadly Creatures. As I mentioned, you alternate playing as the tarantula and the scorpion, and being that they're different animals, they each have unique moves that suit them. Let's start with the tarantula. It's a lot more agile than the scorpion as it can walk faster, jump, and can shoot webs for use in both traversal and attacking. You can manually aim your web shots with the pointer by holding the button down, but the aiming is so unwieldy even after I lowered the sensitivity all the way down in the menu. You don't have a choice when using it to grapple between points, but during fights, it's much easier to just tap C and shoot in the direction you're facing. You will never have the time to aim manually during a fight. I tried. Eventually I learned how absolutely overpowered this web shot is in combat, and it became kind of a crutch. It temporarily incapacitates enemies, but the bigger the enemy, the less time they'll be vulnerable. That said, even on some of the bigger lizards where it's basically boop and they're back at it, that short moment where they're dazed is still super helpful. Eventually you also gain the ability to climb ceilings, but it seems so weird to me that the game just suddenly decides that a tarantula can now climb ceilings or shoot webs. It would be like suddenly being told you're allowed to breathe.
Hey man, they said you can start breathing again. Alright, cool.
As for the scorpion, you can't jump, but you do gain a dash move in the all-important block. You also attack faster with its front claws and gain the ability to perform quick-time event finishers if an enemy's health is low enough. Sounds cool in practice, but it'll frequently tell you that you did the wrong motion even when you know you didn't. It would also be nice if enemies had any sort of animation or visual difference that showed they could be taken out with the finisher. You only get a button prompt on the screen when you're close enough. But don't worry about failing, because you can just mash the C button when the animation is over and you're back at it with absolutely no penalty whatsoever. Every kill you get gives you points towards unlocking new moves, with harder enemies giving you more points. You have no choice when to unlock certain moves, as it's a set path for each character, and you will almost assuredly reach the end of the path well before you're done the game. I tended to just ignore these new moves because I found there's really no point using them. Most end up just being stronger versions of your regular attacks, but require specific timing of your swings and button presses. The thing is, this is not a combo heavy game, and combat doesn't exactly ask you to think tactically. Why would I try to use some of these harder to execute moves in the middle of a fight when the basic moves work just as well and don't rely on me hoping the game accepts my timing? There's even a stealth pounce for the tarantula, even though there's virtually no instance where you're allowed to be stealthy. I used it once and then never again. The one useful new move you do get is the Venom Strike, which you unlock for both characters. Wind up by holding B, swing down the remote, and if it lands, it will slowly hurt your enemy with Venom. This is an absolute godsend against some of the bigger enemies, as their slower attacks make it harder to interrupt you while you're winding up, and it seems to do a significant amount of damage to them. Speaking of the combat, one of the biggest problems I ended up having with this game was the motion controls. Like I said previously, the aiming is horrible. It just whips around way too quickly, but at least this is only ever needed when grappling to webs as the tarantula, so you're not under any sort of pressure to do it quickly since there's rarely enemies around. But both bugs use swings to perform harder hitting attacks, and it is an absolute crapshoot whether these will register properly. You swing horizontally for wide attacks and vertically for more focused attacks, but good luck reliably doing the one you want every time. With the scorpion in particular, so many times I would try to do the tailspin with a horizontal swing and he would just do the sting attack instead, which is a lot more prone to missing than a wide sweep of the tail. I didn't seem to have as many troubles with the tarantula, but there were still some moments of frustration.
Eventually you also gain the ability to eat enemies that have been flipped on their back to gain an absolutely paltry amount of health, and just guess what kind of motion you have to perform to do that. I don't know if you got it right or not, but it's flailing. Over-reliance on motion controls is basically the Wii era in a nutshell.
As for what you're fighting in this game, you start off with the typical small bugs, some annoying as hell spitting guys, some other small spiders, but eventually you start fighting lizards, rats, hornets, and even other tarantulas and scorpions. Then there's the Black Widows that can poison you back, which prompts the music to channel its inner Jason Voorhees. The biggest annoyance when fighting all these guys is how you have absolutely no camera control, which includes no lock-on and no way to snap the camera forward like in Zelda. You better hope to God you're facing the enemy you want to actually attack, because otherwise you're just going to completely whiff it, so just get used to that. The camera problem extends outside of combat as well, namely when you're crawling on walls. It will whip around so fast as you try to just orient yourself and figure out where you're supposed to go. Even the slightest movement is enough to set it off. There's a couple of bosses to fight too, and absolutely none of them are good. You got a Gila monster who charges at you and requires you to dig in the middle of the arena to make your escape. The camera during this has the opposite but equally horrible problem of always being locked onto the boss, which makes finding where you need to dig far more annoying than it needs to be and leads to a lot of unintended damage. Then there's the persistent rattlesnake that you fight at the beginning and end of the game in basically the exact same way both times. It snaps at you a few times, then dangles its tail, which you have to strike. Rinse and repeat until done. I think it's also worth pointing out just how horrible the animations look on these two bosses. They just snap into position constantly. For a game that was originally going to be about controlling a snake, they sure didn't care about how the snake moves. There's also a sort of mini-boss sequence where you have to escape from webs while widow spiders slowly descend towards you as you execute more QuickTime events. This is not remotely fun, so of course you have to do it more than once. I love nothing more than an excuse for more QTEs in my video games. Now you may have noticed that there is a lot of desert going on, and that leads me to another big problem I have with the game. The environments are just kind of boring and drab. It's just desert, desert, desert. You got your sand, you got your rocks, you got your cacti, and you got oh so much brown. This is made even better by the fact that you revisit some areas with both characters, with different side paths only accessible by one or the other. Fine enough idea, but the revisited locales aren't at all interesting, so coming back with a new character doesn't add anything. There's even one area that you come back to 3 or 4 times. Every once in a while you see some interesting stuff like a coffin with a skeleton or a Motorola Razr looking phone that I'm pretty sure was outdated even by the time this game came out. Admittedly, things get better in the last third or so of the game. You get to explore all around a car, you go through a dump with a dollhouse, and in the penultimate chapter, you're basically let loose to explore a whole gas station interior, and this is honestly the best part of the game. It's just a big room with enemies randomly placed around, but the sense of scale is absolutely fantastic, and it's cool seeing an otherwise normal room from a different perspective. The game is at its best when you really feel the scale of the world as a small creature, but it just takes so long to get to that point. For the first 2/3 is just desert with a couple vaguely interesting sights along the way. But the moments when you do really get to explore around a neat environment set piece are real standouts that really would have given the game a more unique feel if there were more of them. It doesn't help when the designers place arbitrary walls in front of previously explored paths because they don't want you going there with a different character. It's just such a lazy way of gating off exploration. You may be asking, why would you want to explore these areas anyways? Well, dear viewer, it's because there's 450 grubs to collect, of course. And no, I did not find them all. But I did get 397, and I'm vaguely proud of that. Collecting them unlocks art and video galleries, but the art can't be zoomed in, so you're stuck viewing it in all its beautiful standard definition glory. You do get some actor interviews where they couldn't seem less interested, at least.
The main thing that surprised me about Deadly Creatures is the way it looks.
And even though the rewards were essentially meaningless to me, that grub counter always pops up when you get another one, so I get that itty bitty amount of dopamine each time. And I need my dopamine, even if it means having to recollect everything when I died. Every time. I regret it only a little. You also can't skip cutscenes you've already seen because somehow developers have still never gotten the memo that this should be standard. This leads me to the final moments of the game, and it's certainly an interesting end to say the least. About 3/4 of the way through the game, you watch the two men finally find the gold they've been searching for, but Dennis Hopper's character doesn't like sharing, so he knocks out Billy Bob with a shovel. What a twist. This eventually leads to the tarantula and your rattlesnake buddy being captured by Dennis and taken to his gas station. You make your way out and face off against the snake one last time, complete with a ring of fire. Suitably epic. After beating him, the gas station blows up, but before celebrating, you have one more Scorpion chapter to complete. It somehow finds its way to the gas station too, and you find Dennis Hopper coming back to his business in disarray. Naturally, your job is to stab him in the dick a few times, like all good final bosses ask of you. The fight that ensues is absolutely horrible, just like every other boss fight in this game. You're so slow and you can easily be stomped or shot. You're supposed to climb up his leg when you can and hold on while he walks around so you don't get knocked off. But once you finally get him 3 times, you find Dennis was the one to blow up the gas pump. Oh, the horror. Your two deadly creatures make it out alive and go off on their separate ways as a piece of gold spins in the darkness and sends you off. And to top it all off, because I guess I was about to die when I beat the game, a heartbeat persisted throughout the credits, and I checked, this is not supposed to happen.
And that's Deadly Creatures for you. I don't want to say it had a lot of promise going into it, but it definitely had its moments that it should have leaned into more. Stuff like the car or the gas station where you truly feel like a small creature stuck in a human's world would have been great, but you really don't get much of this until the last third of the game. I also like that the two creatures' moves were well suited to the type of creature they were, and I think they were good choices for the game. Despite all this, we got too many samey looking environments, a janky camera, unresponsive and sometimes too responsive controls, and for a game called Deadly Creatures, I didn't feel all that deadly. And to me, that is the biggest crime. Why else would I play games if not to be bloodthirsty? Speaking of bloodthirsty, stay tuned for my next video where I'm going to talk about Darkwatch. See you then.
Hey guys, I'd like to call this part of the video the after credits, but there was no credits section. I'll just use this at the end of my videos just to tell you stuff that's on my mind and stuff like that. I figured, at least for this video, here's some glitches I found while I was playing. Thought that'd be kind of funny. I just wanted you guys to tell me like what you thought of the video. This is the first time I've ever done something like this. I've never edited, I've never done VO, I've never recorded gameplay. So this is all new to me. This video took me a lot of time to do. But as I mentioned at the end of the video, the next game I'm going to do is going to be about Darkwatch. That I'm hoping that'll only take me about 3 weeks to do as compared to the many months this one took. Since I know a lot more of what I'm doing, it should be a lot smoother process, at least I hope so. So yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Nebulowl. Probably post updates and, we'll tweet about whatever the hell I feel like. But thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, then please subscribe and then make sure to comment about whatever. If you want to have suggestions on what I should improve on, I'd love to hear those. I know there's a lot I need to do differently in the next video, and it definitely will be a much better video, hopefully. Or at least I hope so. But thank you, and stay tuned for the Darkwatch video.